Dead man walking. I might look woke, but I'm asleep. A dead man walking, dead man walking. Lord, please wake me from this miseries. Dead man walking. I might look woke, but I'm asleep. A dead man walking, dead man walking. Lord, please wake me from these miseries. Every night it seems I'm scared to close my own eyes, drenched up in sweat, and even voices can't be seen by the naked eye. Constantly waking up until the thought of death. I guess it's just another day closer to take my final breath with visions of open casket. Man, it seems so real. I felt the cushion on my back, it woke me up in chills. And you can look into my eyes and see my soul disappearing. They're trying to keep my mind straight, but them evil forces is steady when it mine have gone. Sometimes the sin in this world have encountered of men, the devil where the deadlock stare. 31 years old, that might be stranded on death row. Didn't have time to live my life. Boy, this world can be so cold. Looking into the sky for Lord to answer my prayers. Eternal fire casting hell since where my soul must dwell. I tried to relate to footprints as I look back. There was 3 steps. I wasn't being carried. Tag along with that man called death. Sometimes a brother wish it could turn back the hands of times, but can't think that in the same way I ended up dying, wondering how the hell I got myself in this situation. Thought I had some homies, but there was friends that was perpetrating. How long would it last before I totally lose my mind? It's just a matter of sleepless time. Dead man walking. I might look woke, but I'm asleep. A dead man walking, dead man walking. Lord, please wake me from these miseries. Dead man walking. I might look woke, but I'm asleep. A dead man walking, dead man walking. Lord, please wake me from this misery. Sitting up in my cell and thinking about the past. Wonder if I'm gonna make it. I shoot if I'm a dead man. Keep counting my blessings to see I made it this far. But stuck in this situation, I know it's break my tears hard to know when someday a brother gotta face the judgment day. And will I be denied my heavenly rights to lend them gangster ways? I'm sitting on my toilet and blowing hell of smoke through my vents. If I'm going to die, I'm thinking, shoot, let's get it over with. Cause this frustration, this suspense is steady killing me. Not Mr. Seeing my name in the San Antonio obituary, keep telling my homies that man, what day you think I'm gonna lose? It seems like the man then washed his hands and said I'm through with the multiple problems and caused his brother to lose all his faith. And when they have visits, it's hard to look my son in his face. They say there's a light at the end, the very dark tunnel, to calling it quits because they think the devil stole my candle, trapped on the wrong side in this 2 world split dimension. Might look like I'm woke, but I'm a dead man walking. Dead man walking.
Statement to the media. I, at this very moment, have absolutely no fear of what may happen to this body. My fear is for Allah, God only, who has, at this moment, the only power to determine if I should live or die. As a devout Muslim, I am taught and believe that this material life is only for the express purpose of preparing oneself for the real life that it is to come. Since becoming Muslim, I have tried to live as Allah wanted me to live.
Charles Brooks Jr., prisoner number 502, was the first person ever to be killed by lethal injection. He had been on the Ellis Unit's death row for 1,687 days, just over 4.5 years. He was transported to the death house, the Walls Unit in Huntsville, on the morning of December the 7th, 1982. Charles Brooks was 40 years old. Shackled and handcuffed, dressed in his prison-issued white jumpsuit, he sat silently in the back seat of a van. The only things he brought with him were a small clock radio and a dozen cans of Dr. Pepper.
bright-eyed, handsome.
Charles Brooks came from a middle-class African-American family. He had a life filled with alcohol, drugs, and violence. On a December morning in 1976, a prostitute and heroin addict named Marlena Smith had been to a used car lot and traded sexual favors for a test drive. She drove to a liquor store where she picked up her boyfriend, Woody Laudres, and Charles Brooks. The borrowed car broke down. Brooks, high on heroin and beer, walked to a nearby car lot and asked to test drive another car. An employee named David Gregory had to accompany Brooks on the test drive.
It was a revolver.
The next time Gregory was seen, he was being released from the trunk of the car and escorted into a motel. Soon thereafter, shots were heard. The police arrived to find David Gregory alone in the room, gagged, bound, and shot in the head. Brooks was arrested and eventually sentenced to death for the kidnap and murder of Gregory on March the 12th, 1977.
This is the Texas Death House, yes. We presently have 8 cells here, but we only utilize one at a time. That's the way we operate. We have had multiple executions in the past, but we never have more than one individual here at a time.
Upon his arrival at the Huntsville unit on the day of his execution, Brooks was placed in the holding cell, watched over by guards. The prison cook arrived and asked Charles what he wanted for his final meal.
Fried shrimps and oyster.
Brooks asked for fried shrimp and oysters, but told he could only get what the prison kitchen had in stock.
No shellfish.
These 8 cells are what remains of the original death row. It's now used as a holding area for inmates who are scheduled for execution. They have a bed, a toilet, and a sink.
T-bone steak and fries, and Dr. Pepper to wash it down with.
Charles Brooks had had 9 hearings in 5 different courts before 23 judges. Right now, his last appeal at the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans was still open. Shortly after noon, he heard the news on his clock radio that this appeal had been turned down.
You know, here there aren't any women, so the inmate do the homosexual thing. For the rest of life, or rest of us, we take matter into hand, so to speak.
They strap you on the table. Before they strap you to the they strap you to the table. A microphone's supposed to come down.
He is strapped down, first at the ankles. He also be strapped at the legs, at the waist, and across his chest. Lastly, his wrists are inserted through these straps. At that time, the execution team will enter the room and insert needles into each arm.
The warden telephoned to say that a woman named Vanessa Sapp had arrived to see Charlie. She had been corresponding with Brooks since 1977 and visited him regularly on death row.
Fat, black, poor, dressy dress, polyester chic.
Visiting hours were long past. Just make sure she's okay, Brooks requested. Brooks' sons, Derek and Adrian, arrived asking to see their father. They had 5 years to come and see me and didn't. Not once. Tell them they waited too long.
Flexing, right fist.
You know you're going down there and you're going to get strapped to the table and they're going to stick a needle in your arm, but you don't know.
Once the witnesses are in place, the inmate is asked by the warden who is standing in his head if he has any client statements. We've had on one occasion an inmate actually confess his crime on the ground.
To the right,
that's happened once.
Then to the left, then upwards, then downwards.
The guards appeared. It was time for Brooks to shower and change from his prison whites into the civilian clothes he would wear into the death chamber. His last meal was delivered. It was nearing 6 p.m. when he asked for some privacy. He had letters to write and wanted to do this alone.
I was there. Do you think that sodium triopenethol, the first drug that they give to him, which was supposed to put him to sleep in 7 to 12 seconds, put him to sleep? Not on your life, it didn't. And I was there holding his leg. He asked me to hold on to him, and I did, like I did for other ones. Then this boy was given an injection of Pavulon. That's the second injection. It used to be used to put animals to death.
When you are with people who take heroin, you take heroin. When you are with people who take pills, you take pills. When you are with people who drink wine, you drink wine. When you are with people who eat fried shrimps, you eat fried shrimps. When you are with people who...
Results of the attorney's last-minute efforts began coming in. The governor called the warden's office to say that he would not grant a 30-day reprieve. Then the Court of Criminal Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court both concluded deliberations and decreed that the execution should be carried out. It's time.
Time came. I went to the cell, told Charlie it was time to go. He walked straight inside. They strapped him down, and he didn't say a word. He was lying there on the table, just waiting. All the people were brought in. Charlie's fiancée, Vanessa Sapp, was on the front row. Warden Percy said, "Do you have any last words?" He turned and looked at Vanessa Sapp, and he said, "I love you."
Brooks stepped into the hallway. The two guards accompanied him on his last journey to the death chamber, only 10 paces away. Once inside, Brooks climbed onto the gurney and lay back as the 5 members of the tie-down team began putting the restraining straps in place. The prisoner's arms were extended along flat, narrow boards, the hands affixed to them by adhesive tape. In a matter of seconds, the needles through which the chemicals would flow were inserted. When those allowed to witness Charles Brooks's execution were ushered into the small viewing area, the warden asked, "Do you have any last words?" Brooks strained to turn his head so that he might look directly at Vanessa Sapp. "Be strong," he told her. After several seconds of silence, the warden removed his glasses, the prearranged signal to let the flow of the deadly poisons begin. It was 12:09. Brooks remained rigidly still. For a moment, he tried to flex his right fist, but he was only able to move his fingers.
The third drug is one that freezes the heart. That's the one that killed him.
You could see his chest heaving slightly. Then his breathing stopped. There was no more pulse. At 12:16, the doctor pronounced him dead. The execution had taken only minutes, 7 to be precise. Charlie Brooks's last statement was,
I love you. أزدادونا إلا إلى الله. أزدادونا إلا إلى الله. أزدادونا محمد رسول الله. أزدادونا محمد رسول الله. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Inna ila Allah wa inna ila Allah rajun. Verily, unto Allah do we belong. Verily, unto Him do we return. Be strong.
I used to have a good mother and a father, and they certainly stood the test. Now they are in bright glory, and I know their souls are at rest.
Carla Faye Tucker was born in 1959 in Houston, Texas. She was the first woman to be executed in the state of Texas since 1863.
They laid a good example for me. They taught me how to pray. Now I'm truly converted, and I'm walking in this narrow way.
When she was 10, her parents got divorced. When she was 12, she was already deep into sex and drugs. Her mother was a prostitute, and she taught young Carla the secret of the trade from a young age. When she was 14, she left school and joined her mother on the road. Her mother was following rock bands like the Allman Brothers and Eagle, making money on the side from prostitution. It was all sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
As you said, there's a freedom in it where I was forgiven and I experienced that forgiveness. It freed me up inside to soar, and it freed me up inside to go higher and to go deeper with the Lord. Because if we're not going for forgiveness, we're blocking communication and intimacy with the Lord.
When she was 16, she got married, but soon got divorced and went back to work on the street. When she was 20, she met a guy named Daniel Garrett. They fell in love, and they started to live kind of a party life, including a lot of drug use.
On June the 13th, 1983, my sister, Deborah Ruth Carlson Davis Thornton, was viciously murdered by Carla Faye Tucker and Daniel Ryan Garrett.
In our own lives, and bitterness can start to take root in us, but when God forgave me, I think He used that forgiveness and that love to reach down inside me and take every root of evil, every root of horror that was in me, and literally pull it out and get rid of it and fill me up with His love.
I'm so glad salvation is free. It is free for you and me. Now if I'll just live in Jesus, how happy we could be.
Now, the crucial night is June 12, 1983. Tucker, now 23, has a party together with Garrett in their house in Texas. One of the guests is a woman named Shawn, who comes with her face totally bruised. When they ask her what happened, she said that her ex-husband, Jerry Lee Dean, beat the crap out of her. Now, Garrett and Tucker took by then quite a lot of drugs and probably drank also quite much. And they promised her that they will revenge her beating by stealing Dean's prized motorcycle.
They found my sister's body lying in a pool of blood with a 3-foot pickaxe left embedded in her heart.
You have to think about others. You have to think about others. Every choice we make affects somebody else's life.
Now, around 2 a.m.,
every decision we make affects somebody
Garrett
else's life.
Tucker and another man go on a car. By then, they are totally drugged and drive to Dean's house. When they arrived to the hotel when Dean was leaving, the men stayed in the car while Garrett and Tucker went to Dean's place. When they entered the living room, they found the motorcycle scattered in pieces all over the living room, a fact that drove them crazy. Dean, who was sleeping in the other bedroom, heard probably some noises and probably said something, like, "Who's there?" or something like this. Garrett, who heard the sound, ran into the bedroom with a hammer and started hitting Dean on the head with a hammer around 20 times.
You know, there are consequences, whether they are positive or negative. Every choice we make affects somebody else's life. Every decision we make affects somebody else's life. And there are consequences, now, whether they are positive or whether they are negative.
Tucker was in the living room by then, and when she heard the noises, she rushed into the bedroom, and she took a pickup axe that somehow happened to be in the living room. She entered into the living room and started to stack Dean in the body with the pickaxe. And suddenly she heard some noises. There was a woman hiding under the sheets. Her name was Deborah Ruth Thornton. She was an office worker who met Dean a couple of hours before and went to bed with him, talking about being in the wrong place in the wrong time. She actually thought it's her husband who broke into the apartment trying to catch her. Now, when Tucker heard her voices, she started beating Thornton in between her chest with the pickup axe 27 times.
27 times.
Claiming later that every time she stuck the pickup axe between the chest of Thornton, she had a sexual orgasm.
We have to get back to the basics of what God says and the family and everything, and we need to let our lives be governed by the morals of God and by the integrity of God. And until we do, it's almost an I don't care attitude.
I know this whole world do not love me, no how, and it's on account of sin. But I'm so thank God is able for to give me many a friend.
The bodies were discovered the day after. Thornton was still on bed, swimming in a pool of blood. The pickup axe still stuck between her chest. Initially, the police had no idea who committed the crime. But the brother and sister of Tucker and Garrett went to the police and informed about their relative. You see, Tucker and Garrett were running around bragging about the murder and basically threatening everyone or anyone who will say anything that they will kill them too. So their brother and sister went to the police.
I'm not afraid of dying. I know where I'm going, and I know that Judith's already gone to prepare a place for me. And I know that if I have to go on February the 3rd, that he's going to come and he's going to escort me personally. I believe that. I don't have any fear of that. I don't worry about myself.
Now, Tucker was sentenced to death by a jury of 4 men and 8 women. Garrett was sentenced to death too, in a separate trial, but he died in prison before from cancer. The murder of Deborah Ruth Thornton never came into trial because you cannot send someone to death
and yet,
twice.
Religious leaders, political leaders, community leaders from within Texas and all across the country and across the world.
A lot of evangelical leaders were calling me and faxing me and as an old friend of GW saying, get a hold of this guy and tell the governor to
jail,
give her a chance.
Tucker became a born-again Christian.
GW called back the next day and he said, well, you're not going to
her
like my
angelic
decision.
face,
And he said,
soft voice, made her the poster child of the anti-death penalty movement.
It's about what Jesus
John
did.
Paul II wrote a letter on her behalf to the UN and to Governor George W. Bush. Pat Robertson, the leader of the majority right, asked Governor Bush to commute a sentence to life in prison. But Bush, who was running for re-election, didn't want to appear soft, so he sent her to death.
I have sought guidance through prayer. I have concluded judgments about the heart and soul of an individual on death row are best left to a higher authority. Karla Faye Tucker has acknowledged she is guilty of a horrible crime. The courts, including the United States Supreme Court, have reviewed the legal issues in this case, and therefore I will not grant a 30-day stay. May God bless Karla Faye Tucker, and God bless her victims and their families.
In prison, she married her priest, but their marriage was never consummated. with a spiritual reunion.
That forgiveness.
Truly,
It freed me up
the joy of the Lord is my strength. It's like this this fire that raged, this fire of joy that
she became
raged,
sort of
like
a mini celebrity.
Table, a feast,
she was interviewed by Larry King Live and appeared on the cover of People magazine and other news outlets.
God put me in a situation where I had to grow up into, it's going to sound really weird, but had to grow up into tribulation, you know, putting me in the line.
And then he'll start showing us where he's at work around us, just like in the experience of God. He'll start revealing where he's at work around us. Most of the time,
on February 3rd, 1998, Carla Fettaker was executed with a lethal injection. Her last words were,
"Yes, sir. I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this. Baby, I love you. Ron, give Peggy a hug for me. Everybody has been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I'm going face to face with Jesus now. Warden Baggett, thank all of you so much. You have been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I will see you when you get there. I will wait for you."
I'm so glad salvation is free. It is free for you and me. Now if I live in Jesus, how happy we could be.
Every detail of Carla Faye Tucker's execution was documented, including her last meal, a banana, a peach,
and salad.
Even for the people who aren't for the death penalty, I hope they sit back and take a moment to realize how that victim feels when they're in that position. Because it's horrible. It's a horrible thing to do. I mean, the last thing that these people see is a gun pointed at them.
The fatal stabbing of Wanda Lopez, a single mother and gas station clerk, and her final screams were captured on a 911 tape on February the 4th, 1983. 40 minutes later, a man named Carlos de Luna was arrested close to the bloody crime scene. He was quickly convicted and sentenced to death, even though he proclaimed his innocence and identified another man as his killer. 16 years after De Luna died by lethal injection in 1989, the Chicago Tribune has uncovered evidence strongly suggesting that the acquaintance he mentioned, Carlos Hernandez, was indeed the killer. After years of silence, relatives and friends recounted how Hernandez repeatedly bragged that De Luna went to death row for a murder he himself committed.
Corpus Christi, Texas gas station attendant Wanda Lopez knows she is in trouble. Within 90 seconds, blood-curdling screams as she's stabbed to death.
The screaming woman was Wanda Lopez in her call to the police before she was killed.
Shortly after the attack on Wanda Lopez, police found a truck parked a few hundred yards from the gas station. Carlos de Luna was lying shirtless and shoeless in a puddle of water under a pickup. They handcuffed him and put him in the rear of a squad car. 2 witnesses were led to the car, where an officer shone a flashlight into De Luna's face. Both men positively identified him as the person that they had seen at the scene of the crime. As police drove De Luna to jail, he grew agitated. "I'll help you if you help me," he repeatedly told the officers, and finally blurted out, "I didn't do it, but I know who did." He said he was at a nearby nightclub when he heard sirens. Because he had been released from prison only weeks earlier, he panicked and ran.
Die USA sind an sich ein Hinrichtungsphänomen. Sie sind gemeinsam mit Japan der einzige Staat, der völlig klar rechtsstaatlichen demokratischen Strukturen entspricht und trotzdem an der Todesstrafe festhält. Und innerhalb dieses perversen Systems ist Texas sicherlich ein bizarres und mörderisches Highlight.
In der praktischen Umsetzung wird das System in Texas eindeutig am rigidesten gehandhabt, was eben in der Ausschöpfung der Möglichkeiten und auch was die Unterstützung durch die Bevölkerung angeht.
Escosa said, "What does he look like?" Lopez said, "A Mexican." Escosa says, "Black?" Lopez said, "No." Escosa says, "White?" Lopez says, "No." Escosa said, "Hispanic?" Lopez
Die
said,
Bevölkerungseinstellung kommt typischerweise aus 2 Dingen. Das eine ist Geschichte und das andere sind politische Vorbilder. Das ist so dieser eine Wild-West-Gedanken, der da eine Rolle spielt, und der andere sind die politischen Vorbilder. Texanische Gouverneure und die lokale Politik, wo ganz klar Rache und nicht Recht im Vordergrund steht.
Die Tat tötet den Mann. Nicht das Gericht oder die sind nur die Ausführungen, die Tat tötet ihn.
Tampier says,
erwiesen ist, und das ist ganz interessant, dass die Todesstrafe nicht zur Verbesserung der gesellschaftlichen Situation beiträgt. Sie trägt nicht dazu bei, mehr Sicherheit zu schaffen, und sie trägt nicht dazu bei, die Anzahl der Verbrechen oder auch die Gewalttätigkeit der Verbrechen zu verringern. Also insofern ist eine Sühne für eine moderne Gesellschaft nicht von Vorteil.
Die Menschenrechte gehören zum System. Innerhalb des Systems gelten sie. Eine anthropologische Konstante gibt es in diesem Sinne nicht, die ist auch nicht nachgewiesen. Mit einem Wort, anthropologisch, kann man dazu gar nichts sagen. Es ist ein hoher, wenn Sie so wollen, kultureller Anlass, die Selbstreferenz eines Systems in dieser Weise zu begründen. Da gibt es keine Möglichkeit einer objektivierenden, transzendierenden Begründung, denn die wird ja gerade geleugnet.
De Luna told his lawyers that on their way to the nightclub, his acquaintance went to a gas station to buy a pack of cigarettes, which sold for 85 cents, the same amount Lopez is heard saying on the 911 tape shortly before she was stabbed. This man, De Luna said, was the real killer, and his name was Carlos Hernandez. Feared for his violent temper, he was also particularly fond of knives. The lead prosecutor scoffed at De Luna's assertion, calling Hernandez a phantom. But the jurors who found De Luna guilty and sentenced him to death in July 1983, 5 months after his arrest, didn't hear the whole truth. Hernandez did exist. Not only was he well known to police as a violent criminal, but the co-prosecutor of De Luna's trial and the lead detective knew Hernandez too. 4 years earlier, he was the lead suspect in a case they handled together, the murder of another Corpus Christi woman.
Da geht es zum Beispiel darum, als Staatsanwalt einen Wettbewerb zu gewinnen. Und da viele Ämter in den USA Wahlämter sind, die in europäischen Staaten nicht als Wahlämter vergeben werden, ist man da eben als politisch Handelnder auch wieder von der öffentlichen Meinung abhängig und versucht, der zu gefallen.
Erkenntnis, dass die Todesstrafe keine geeignete Strafe zur Sanktionierung von Verbrechen ist, funktioniert besser, wenn sie von oben verordnet wird.
Es gibt eine Stabilität in Europa bezüglich der Ablehnung gegenüber der Todesstrafe, die aber immer fragil ist. Sicher ist da auch der europäische Einigungsprozess ein Rahmen, der dem eine Stabilität verleiht. Wer sich wieder für die Todesstrafe ausspricht als Staat, kann nicht in der Europäischen Union sein.
Gerade bei Kinderschändern zum Beispiel, da gibt es sicher einen Prozentsatz, der in so einem Fall die Todesstrafe fordert.
Also es kann keinen menschenrechtlich fundierten Standpunkt geben, innerhalb welcher Verbrechensgruppen die Todesstrafe weniger schlimm als bei anderen wäre. Mord staatlicher bleibt staatlicher Mord.
While De Luna sat on death row for 6 years, Hernandez was on the streets of Corpus Christi and often back in court, facing allegations that he had attacked women. Hernandez went to prison for the last time in 1996. When police arrested him, he was carrying 2 knives. He never got out and he died in the spring of 1999. 5 people were identified who said Hernandez told them that he stabbed Wanda Lopez and that De Luna, whom he called his stupid tocayo, went to death row in his place.
Und was die Todesstrafe auch bewirkt, ist auch ein Zusammenhalt der Gruppe. Dass ein Symbol wird für die Gruppe. Dass ich den Gruppenschädling töte. Der gehört weg, der gehört nicht zur Gruppe.
Das ist in Texas ganz besonders gut erkennbar, weil Texas ja ein sehr transparentes Hinrichtungsland ist. Die Todesstrafe ist schwarz, ist arm und ist schlecht gebildet.
One of Corpus Christi's senior detectives now states that De Luna was wrongly executed. The former detective, Eddie Garza, said tipsters told him that Hernandez was the killer, yet those tips were never pursued. Of the witnesses, only Kevin Baker came eye to eye and saw the man who stabbed Wanda Lopez to death. Baker identified De Luna at the time, but now says he was uncertain. Carlos De Luna and Carlos Hernandez were about the same height and looked very much alike.
Baker said he looked Hispanic. All Mexicans looked the same. The police brought him. They said, this is the man that was under the car. So I said, yes, he looks Hispanic.
After the witnesses to the execution filed in, the warden asked, Carlos De Luna, do you have any last words? De Luna made no reference to the slaying of Wanda Lopez. At that, the warden removed his glasses.
I held his right hand. He was squeezing very tight as they inserted the needle. Fortunately, it went quickly. He had previously asked me to stay in touch with him, so I moved down to touch his leg right above his ankle. The needle went in well on the right arm. The sodium triopenethol began to flow. And he began breathing slowly. After about 10 seconds, he raised up his head and looked at me with those big brown eyes. The warden looked at me and I looked at him. Something was not going right. After about 10 seconds more, he raised his head up again and looked square in my face and my eyes. I just simply squeezed his leg. I don't know what he was trying to say. I wish I did. Nothing was happening. I had told him, I had promised him that it wouldn't hurt, that it wouldn't take long. He might have been thinking, you lied to me. I was sick.
Well, I believe that the death penalty is appropriate in certain circumstances. There are extraordinarily heinous crimes, terrorism, the harm of children, in which it may be appropriate. Obviously, we've had some problems in this state in the application of the death penalty, and that's why a moratorium was put in place, and that's why I was so proud to be one of the leaders in making sure that we overhauled the death penalty system that was broken. We have to have this ultimate sanction for certain circumstances in which the entire community says this is beyond the pale. And I think it's important that we preserve that. But I also think that it's got to be fair and uniformly applied, and that's something that has not always happened in this state. And I'm glad that we have made some improvements on this score. Now, I agree with actually Mr. Keyes that the issue of abortion and the death penalty are separate questions. It's unfortunate that I think, whereas with respect to the death penalty, Mr. Keyes respects the possibility that other people may have a differing point of view, that in this area he has labeled them everything from terrorists to people promoting a slaveholder position to suggesting that they are consistent with Nazism. I think that kind of rhetoric obviously is not particularly helpful in us resolving what are very difficult and emotional subjects.
I want to say I hold no grudges. I hate no one. I love my family. Tell everyone on death row to keep the faith and don't give up.
Also im Zusammenhang der letzten Worte eine solche zumindest blickhafte Verbindung, die sich den Worten entzieht. Da bleibt auch etwas verborgen. Also das letzte Wort verbirgt mehr, als das es sagt. Es ist sozusagen ein letzter Tribut an das Sprechen, also eines Übergangs in eine andere Dimension. Insofern ist auch ein letztes Wort unter den Bedingungen, nicht wahr, des Henkers, der neben einem sitzt oder steht, auch etwas Vorläufiges und aber gerade dadurch ausgezeichnet, dass es diese Vorläufigkeit selbst sagt und nicht sagt.
Dieses Nicht-Spektakel, dieser gewaltarmen Zu-Tode-Bringung kommt mir jetzt eben so vor, dass man das eigentlich nur hinkriegt unter den Bedingungen der an sich wahnsinnig lebens- und menschenliebenden Biomacht, indem man sagt, das, was ich da umbringe, ist ja gar kein Mensch mehr, sondern ich besiegle eigentlich durch eine eher medizinische Maßnahme einen schon vorher feststehenden symbolisch-sozialen Tod. Also sie werden sozusagen sanft eingeschläfert wie Haustiere. Und das ist quasi genau das, was das Ritual durchführt. Dass es eigentlich allen sagt, die sind schon tot.
Es ist ein hochtheatraler Akt, der aus dem Privaten vor die Bühne sozusagen dieses doppelten Systems des Staates, in dem er eingespannt ist, gestellt wird. Es ist wahrscheinlich der schwierigste theatrale Improvisationsakt, den man überhaupt vollbringen muss, wenn man delinquent ist, vor Zeugen seine letzten Worte an wen auch immer zu sprechen.
It's like the Wizard of Oz, right? You have to have a curtain always, right? And behind the curtain you find the secret of the state, which is that the state is a killing machine, and that's the foundation of law, that's the foundation of justice, and that's the foundation of the state. There is this window, right, with the curtain that is opened just like a proscenium stage. Right? And that moment of revelation of the theater of death on one side, and on the other side, like the little room with the seats in which you have the witnesses. It's really obscene, like to think about that this is theater. but again, like to think about why is it that the rhetoric of theater is necessary at that point, right? To affirm the act, right? Or even to put yourself only as a spectator, to affirm that the witness is always a spectator.
Frances Ellen Newton was executed on September 14, 2005. She was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of her family. Her estranged husband, Adrian, age 23, her son, Elton, age 7, and daughter, Farah, age 21 months. The three were murdered on April 7, 1983. When they were murdered, Newton was 21, a high school graduate who worked as an accountant. By the time she was executed, she was 39.
There are so many things that I don't know and I don't have answers to, but there are some things that I do know, and that I know that if a jury knew, that they would have come to a different decision.
The three were murdered with a .25 caliber pistols that apparently belonged to Newton's boyfriend or man she was seeing at the time. Both her and her husband were seeing other people, a fact that will come to haunt her when the trial was running. But Newton maintained her innocence from the first moment she was interrogated up to the moment she was executed, claiming that a drug dealer killed her family. The Houston police report shows that her husband was a drug user that owed a lot of money to his suppliers.
One of my neighbors said they heard gunshots at 7:30. Why weren't they brought to testify in trial? I just saw that in the clemency report. I never knew that. That person should have been brought to trial to testify. That was something the defense was supposed to do and never did.
Now, the prosecutor has two facts that they mention as the motive for the murder. 3 weeks before the murder, Newton purchased life insurance policy for herself, her husband, and her daughter, each worth $50,000. The son, Elton, already had an insurance policy on his name. Newton also forged the signature of her husband, claiming later that she did it because she didn't want him to know about the money, or that she put money aside for insurance. The main beneficiary of the insurance was herself and her mother. The second thing was a gun that Newton hid in the house of her relatives. When they asked her why she did it, she said, "I didn't want a gun to be in my home. I didn't want the kids to play with a gun."
At that time, I know that my husband owed money to this guy he was selling drugs for. The guy is not a figment of my imagination, That was real, that was going on, And of course, when I find out that my husband and children were murdered, that was my first thought.
Now, ballistic report shows that another gun was actually the murder weapon. This gun was found on another case that had no relation to Newton case, but the ballistic reports and the bullet matched. This fact never came into the trial. Another fact that a relative of Newton was in jail, and there he shared a cell with another person who bragged about the fact that he killed the family. This also never came into trial. Newton was convicted and sentenced to death.
We were kids together. We got married, we had children together, and we were growing together. Adrian was a very loving person.
Now, her execution date was supposed to be December 1, 2004. She already was moved into the execution chamber, but 2 hours before the scheduled execution, Governor Perry of Texas issued a stay of 120 days so more forensic evidence can be checked. She then went to the Texas Supreme Court, but they rejected her appeal, which was like the 4 out of 5 appeals she was granted. She went to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they refused to hear her case, sending it back to the Texas Board of Parole. The Texas Board of Parole voted 7-0 against her appeal and sent it back to the Texas court. The Texas court rejected her appeal again, despite the fact that the parents of her dead husband asked for her death sentence to be commuted into life in prison.
I had a lot of support. I had my first child early. My parents were very disappointed in me, but they said, okay, this happened, don't make the mistake again, you know, and they encouraged me to continue being a teenager because I was a teenager, but at the same time they helped me to be a good mother to my son. And Adrian's mom and dad were very supportive, as was he. It's difficult being away from family anyway. I've always kind of been, with all of my brothers and sisters, I've always kind of been insulated, you know, and always had family around me. So it's been kind of hard not having that. And then under the cloud of guilt that I am, losing my husband and my children, that's been difficult, you know.
18 years after she was convicted, Newton was sentenced to death on September 14, 2005, from lethal injection. She was the third woman to be executed in Texas and the first African American. She was also the 110th inmate to be executed under Governor Perry, who is thinking right now about running to to be the U.S. president from the Republican. Perry, by then, was in office 1,728 days. That means that every 16 days, he sent someone to death. Newton made no last statement and asked for no last meal.
Wichita, Kimura, Hora, Nikora, Koene, Hene, Noa. Wichita, Kimura, Hora, Niko, Hene, Hene, Noa. Water spirit feeling stronger round my head. Makes me feel glad that I'm not dead. Wichita, to Kimura, Hora, Niko, Hene, Hene, Noa. Wichita, to Kimura, Hora, Niko, Hene, Hene, Noa. Water spirit feeling stronger round my head. Makes me feel glad that I'm not dead. Wichita, to Kimura, Hora, Niko, Hene, Hene, Noa. Wichita, to Kimura,